I always forget to add us to the stream before. All right, hang on. Anyway, the Fantasmagorium show presents Guns, Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. Roger Moore returns. Jaws arrives. We are in luck, as this film has very little to do with the book, according to Sir Roger. Also, Kat and I will talk a little No Time to Die box office and the upcoming home video release. But before we plunge any deeper, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that tonight we review the man, or no, not the man with the golden gun. That was last week. The Spy Who Loved Me. I am Scotty. My opposite number, Catherine, is here, and Steve has provided Tabasco again. No, it's true. I'll tell you when it shows up.
I know when it shows up.
Anyway, we'll get there. So what's going on, Kat?
Not much. I actually ended up watching the movie twice today. The first time I watched it, I was very distracted. Mm-hmm. The second time I watched it, I was still a bit distracted.
Well, fair enough. Well, and also, I suppose we'll get to it during the recap, but there are parts that are supposed to be really, really exciting, and they kind of drag, and then there's more. But I do like the movie. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into it. What's going on with our record-setting boy?
So, No Time to Die, over the last day or so, has become the first ever movie to cross the $700 million mark with only $150 million domestic in U.S. and Canada.
Wow.
Ever. That's not pandemic. That's just ever. Currently, it's now at 708.8 million. That's
amazing. But it is also the high and the number one international grossing movie of the year.
Yes. Number one grossing Hollywood
international
film.
Oh, pardon me.
I did 2 Chinese films which far exceeded that. But I think they may have only been released in China. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, either way, it's nice that James Bond is at least, in the top 3.
Yes.
Still,
in all likelihood, it definitely will pass F9 for Hollywood films overall. That one got 720. So this should comfortably pass that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, no. I want to know because we're on the road to $1 billion. How long? How long until it finally makes $1 billion?
It won't. There's no more big markets for it to open in.
The moon. We need theaters on the moon.
Yes, and it made approximately 32 million, I think, over the weekend in Australia, which was its last major market. So
okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're pretty much done now, especially with COVID cases rising in Europe again. Who knows how that's going to fare for the theaters over there? But I think it'll end up third behind Casino, or third behind Skyfall and Spectre for amount of earnings for this franchise.
Yeah. Hey, I'm impressed. I didn't think it was going to make that much. So
I thought it would maybe make around 500, and then with all the marketing tie-ins, like with Bollinger, Omega, Aston Martin, Jaguar, Nokia, that's offsets some of the costs. I'm not sure how much, but I think because initially fans were thinking, oh, well, if they're 464 in the hole, then they need 928. It's like, yes, but the studio may not need that because of all those marketing tie-ins, which they estimated would have to make between 700 and 800 to break even. So it looks like at the very least they might actually break even, which would be pretty surprising. And a bit of a shame that it's not probably won't turn a profit, but that they got all the merchandising for that. And speaking of merchandising, that could segue into this.
That was perfect.
They have confirmed this week what we already suspected is that the film will be out on 4K and Blu-ray on December 21st in the US and Canada, December 20th in the UK, and a couple other places. They got about 36 minutes of bonus features for stuff relating specifically to the movie. They got a one on the Matera sequence, probably all about the DB5. They got like an 11-minute bit on designing Bond, like all the the art direction and all that. An 8-minute one on the locations, and then like a 6-minute one on the action. So not much in that area, but they do have the 45-minute Being James Bond documentary. And according to the digital bits, that's only going to be on the 4K disc, which is interesting because the regular Blu-ray DVD combo pack is a 3-disc set. And it's like, okay, so you have one DVD, one Blu-ray, and then another Blu-ray disc. And I'm thinking, Well, they already said that those 36 minutes of featurettes are going to be on the standard Blu-ray anyway.
Okay.
And so if the Being James Bond documentary is exclusive to the 4K, then what's going to be on the second Blu-ray disc in the set? I don't know. Unless for some reason they broke up the bonus features on that one just because. It'd be kind of weird. But I thought that caught me by surprise because the Blu-ray one seemed more, it boasts the 3-disc collector's edition, whereas the 4K one is just, standard, 4K plus, plus Blu-ray plus digital. So that was kind of, I looked at that kind of stuff. I'm like, that's kind of funny. So that'll be out December 21st. Unfortunately, there is no audio commentary from Cary Fukunaga, even though it's reported that he did record one. So so far I haven't been able to successfully hunt down where that might be, unless they're holding it out for a later release. But I can't imagine they would do that. So I don't know.
It is strange. Where did you hear that it was reported that the director recorded?
MI6 HQ, which is a Bond news site.
We missed it. Well, hopefully. I don't know. Maybe they'll make it exclusive when it's. I don't know. I don't know how special features work on streaming. Can you get? I feel like we've talked about the audio commentaries.
Sometimes they do have things on there, but I figure even then it would have been announced as being an included thing, even though it would say in brackets, on the digital version only, which is something I do really hate. That it's like people get discs because they want, the content on the disc. They don't want to do the streaming. That's the whole point. Things to digital.
Well, we could go on and on about the history of, oh my God, what was that one where you had to connect, like the Fox Live or whatever? And the special features that would pop up. Oh my stars. The things that they used to do back when DVDs and Blu-rays were, ram-packed with special features and commentaries. But we can't do that. It's the wrong show. I'm sure that someone has a physical media show somewhere. I think we should talk about The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, a lot of changes between this and the previous film, because a lot happened in between the 3 years. First of all, there was the fight over, with Kevin McClory over whether they could use Spectre and Blofeld again. And they even went so far as to have Richard Maibaum write a script which involved a bunch of extreme organizations like the Red Army, the Japanese Army, Black September, all going after a Spectre base so they can get a hold of their submarine to land ballistic missiles to take out the petroleum fields and declare a new world order. And I'm like, that seems like a pretty well fleshed out idea to be going on when you don't know if you can even get the rights back to the character in the organization. And sure enough, they had to scrap it. One, because they couldn't get Spectre, and two, Broccoli thought it was too political with all those organizations in there. And the idea of having Bond team up with the KGB came from Cubby went to Russia and he showed a movie called The Blue Bird. And the Russians he showed it to, they're like, yeah, this is really good, but unfortunately it normally wouldn't fly here because it's too anti-Russian. And so he got that idea and thought, well, you like some of the Bond films, so let's have him team up with a KGB agent for a change. So that was where that script element came from. At one point in the script, they were going to have it be Bond reteaming with Tatiana Romanova from Russia with Love, and they were going to try and stop a Spectre plot to launch nuclear missiles. Or they're going to steal a nuclear submarine for its nuclear missiles and launch them from Hugo Drax's base at Loch Ness. And it's like, okay, this is really weird and out there. And so the writing was all over the place. The next big thing happened was they built the 007 stage.
Mm-hmm.
Back then it cost $1.8 million, which is about today the equivalent of 9.2. And of course, that's the massive stage they've used for decades. I mean, it burned down once, which we'll get to when that happened. But they built it primarily for the Lippert supertanker set. But the big thing that happened between this and the last movie is the severance of the business relationship between Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, because Saltzman apparently let the success and fame of Bond go to his head, and he started getting his hands involved in too many different pies, and he was posting his shares of the Bond franchise as collateral against his loans. And then when the bank came to collect, he's like, I want to sell my half. And Cubby's like, you're not selling to a bunch of, random corporations. And so Harry was blocking the production of another movie over it, because United Artists had this deal where they had to have production on a Bond movie going on at least once every 18 months to keep the rights. And Cubby liked that deal. And so this kind of created a tug of war for a while until eventually Harry just couldn't pay off those debts. And so he got an offer from Columbia Pictures to purchase his rights in the Bond franchise. And Cubby's like, hell no. So Cubby put up the money to buy out his half for what today, at the time, was 20 million pounds. Around today, the equivalent of 138 million.
Wow.
To around 20 million pounds, which in 1975 would be equivalent to today's 138 million dollars, I should say, to buy out his half, and that sort of was the end of the Broccoli Saltzman relationship, for better or worse, depending on how fans look at it. I mean, from a business perspective, for better, because things are stable and not being sold off and parted and by all sorts of different companies. But it's just kind of nutty. And there was a good documentary that's in the Bond 50 set, actually, about Harry Saltzman, that is on the From Russia with Love disc, called Harry Saltzman Showman. It's pretty cool. I advise that you check it out. Kind of sad too, but pretty good. So then we finally got into The Spy Who Loved Me.
Let's just wait before we go on. That's very absolutely everything that you just said about Harry Saltzman is 100 correct. But I wouldn't be a good Canadian if I didn't. Saltzman, what were you thinking? I miss you. You made some bad calls, buddy. I liked Harry Saltzman years, and there's a distinct. You are absolutely correct with the tonal shift as well. You do feel a lack of. There's a lack of salt, and so.
Yeah, that's true, and it is it's even sadder that their friendship kind of ended at that time too. It wasn't until they didn't see each other again until the premiere of For Your Eyes Only, and that's only because Chaim Topol, who played a role in that film, invited invited him to the premiere because he thought it would be nice that they could kind of make up, which they did for the most part. I don't think they saw each other again after that, but that was still a nice gesture. And it was sad too, because around the time that Harry was dealing with all these problems in the early 70s, his wife died of cancer, and he was going through really depressed, and it was like really sad. And he only ended up ever making one more film after this. And I think the production company that Broccoli and Saltzman had was named after their wives' first names, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah, Dana Broccoli and Jacqueline Saltzman, Dan Jack.
Yeah.
And that's what Harry had threatened to do. He was going to take his shares of the Dan Jack and sell those, and that's what Cubby was like, okay, we can't. And that's where that kind of drew the line. So that was upsetting. But yeah, Harry Saltzman, great guy.
Yes. Anyway, moving on.
The choice of The Spy Who Loved Me, yes, it's the name is taken, or the title rather, is taken from the novel, or the novella, I should say. Bears no resemblance whatsoever. The only elements of that story which made it into the film were the characters of Jaws and Sandor, who were based on the characters of Horror and Slugsy, which were just second-rate assassin-type characters. And the difference with Jaws, named Horror, was that he had steel-capped teeth, sort of like how Mr. Hinks had the little steel things that he put on his thumbtacks. And that's kind of what Horror had. He had little tips that he put on the edges of his teeth rather than just having full-on steel teeth. And for those that don't know, the story was basically a short story split into 3 parts titled Me, Them, and Him, in which it's following this Canadian woman working at the Canadian Embassy and how she gets involved with different men in the whole world of espionage and how horribly they treat her. And you meet Bond in the 3rd act of it. And Fleming's purpose was that he didn't understand why his books, which he thought were really serious and were being beloved by children in schools and read by them. And so he wanted to write a cautionary tale for children to worry that this isn't the world, which is a very bizarre way to approach it, because the book is the most sexually explicit of all of the Bond stories. So I don't know what Fleming was thinking in that, if you're writing this as a cautionary tale for children, obviously, I mean, I know back then people were a lot more lenient with what they let their kids see compared to today, but there's no way they would let them read some of the passages in that book back then. And sure enough, all the critics hated it, and even Fleming acknowledged that, yeah, it was terrible, and he actually personally requested that they would never reprint the book after the initial sales, and that request was honored after he died. You could still get them at, third-rate, bookstores or whatever, or not third-rate bookstores, but rather bookstores, but get, third-rate editions, I should say, 3rd or 4th rate. It's just, that's where I got all my Fleming Bond novels, at a mom-and-pop's bookstore for, between $2 or $3 a piece.
Oh yeah, that's how I collected them, and I never read them, and then I got rid of them.
Yeah, and there was nothing memorable to me about the story of The Spy Who Loved Me, other than that it was, again, the most sexually explicit. It's like, yeah, Kelly, whatever. And even though Fleming had forbid any aspects of the story from being adapted, since he had already died, they got permission from the Fleming Foundation, which they ended up owning, to take the inspiration of Jaws and Sandor and the title. And Broccoli argued that if we base it on this, it will cause people to forget that story more, because they're going to associate it with that name with the movie more than they will with other things. And to cement that, he made sure to get a novelization written, which was the first ever novelization of a Bond film, which surprisingly has a lot of differences even to the finished movie because it involves Smersh a lot more and stuff like that. Just it's a little weird, but he's right though because the movie obviously is a lot more popular, has sold a lot more copies, and been seen a lot more times than that original story was ever read. So,
well, yeah. And I saw a special feature with Roger Moore, and he was going through sort of like the press junkets, and it was just Roger Moore is so charming, being asked these marathons of questions, and he's like, "Well, luckily the book has nothing to do with our film, just as and just absolutely distancing it, and it was interesting. But yeah, no, I've never read it, but I believe it would be public domain in Canada now, so I could probably download it for nothing.
Probably.
Anyway,
so they actually also went through search for a lot of directors for this movie. A lot of people were turning it down. They weren't really interested, and eventually they settled on Lewis Gilbert. At one point, they interviewed Steven Spielberg and were actually considering him for the job, but then they changed their minds, which I don't know why, because by then he'd already made Jaws, and it's like, okay, he can show that he can shoot shit on the water, which is a nightmare, but you don't want to hire Spielberg. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they thought that Jaws was like a lightning in a bottle type thing, because that was. I mean, yeah, it was a second movie after Duel, but Duel was more of a TV movie. So, but okay, that ship sailed, unfortunately. Lewis Gilbert, of course, had previously directed You Only Live Twice, so it's not surprising that there's a lot of similarities to that storyline here. John Glenn, who'd gone to direct a lot of Bond movies, was also the editor of this movie.
Oh, yeah. It seems like a culmination of a lot of the creatives that went on to be long-term, both behind the camera and in front of the camera.
Yeah, and they got Marvin Hamlish to do the music. He had a great job on this one. And so, yeah, it's like that's something I noticed that the Bond family under Broccoli seemed to be much more tight-knit. Like you said, they had no aversions back then of bringing directors back for 4 or 5 movies. They even asked Guy Hamilton at one point if he wanted to do it. And then that fell, and then he turned him down because he was trying to direct.
What year was this? What year was this, Spy Who Loved Me?
1975.
75?
No, I'm sorry, 77, but all the pre-production was going on in 1975.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know what time, because don't forget, Guy Hamilton was supposed to be doing Superman as well, and that was in production.
That's it. That's right. He turned down. I was trying to remember. So yeah, he turned down this movie because he was trying to get in on Superman.
Yeah,
and he was in the contention for that, but of course lost out to Richard Donner. And unfortunately, I don't think he ever made another really big name, popular movie after that. At least not off the top of my head that I can name.
Well, I like Guy Hamilton's Bond movies on varying levels, but I think his Superman would have been trash. Yeah,
because he did, Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die, and The Man with the Golden Gun. So, but again, that shows again that they're not averse to using the same person in several times in a row, like they would go on to do with John Glenn, and
for sure.
they did with Terrence Young for a bit. And as I understand it, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson did offer Martin Campbell like the entire Daniel Craig era if he wanted to after Casino Royale, and he said no. So at least they're not averse to doing that, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe it'll happen again. So without further ado.
And just before we get into the synopsis, I just want to say hello to everyone in the chat. I see Captain Cockney Mearsbach is here. Sherry is here. Big T Moore is here. Hello. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it. Now, and just before the big show, thank you, It's always a pleasure to receive a super sticker. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Oh, and I speaking of Remo, I did check out her Positive Fandom channel, and we checked out Kat. You were talking about Under the Helmet, the Boba Fett's.
Yes, we were talking all about the history of Boba Fett and our anticipation for the upcoming Disney Plus series.
Yeah. So anyway, now back to our show.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that infomercial, Scott. Okay, so when they played the gun barrel logo at the start of this movie, they actually put a different variation of the Bond theme rather than the typical.
Wicka.
Yeah, it's like, what is? It's kind of interesting. So the film begins with the British nuclear submarine sailing on the surface, as actually they normally do, because it saves fuel and saves time. And then they got. It's funny, you see a lot of like picture of like Playboy stuff up on the walls when the guys are walking through into the mess hall, which I thought was kind of funny. And they're sitting down just kind of bullshitting, and they look at their coffees. All of a sudden it starts rattling. The whole thing's rattling. And then they have the power goes out, and they have the emergency lights come on. They're like, we lost power. What's going on? And then it just cuts to Moscow.
Well, you missed you. I just set you up for a Boba Fett, and you didn't knock it down. You know, one of the guys. What's going on in here? You know who it is? Jeremy Bullock.
That's true. It is Jeremy Bullock. I forgot about that.
Okay, so they cut to Moscow.
Yeah, so we cut to Moscow, and playing a different character this time, we have Walter Gotell playing General Alexis Gogol, who will go on to appear in a total of 6 Bond films, I believe. And he gets a phone call telling him that a Soviet nuclear submarine has vanished as well, and he thinks this is absolutely preposterous. So he calls an agent of his, and it cuts to this agent, and she's in bed with her boyfriend, who's also an agent, and the boyfriend gets the phone call, and he's told to go to the Austrian Alps, and so he takes off and leaves her behind. We then cut to MI6, where M is now being notified about the theft of the disappearance rather of the submarines. Like, what's going on? You guys get 007 on the case. And so Bond, we cut to the Austrian Alps, where Bond is in bed with this beautiful woman, and he gets this interesting telefax thing like out of his watch, which is kind of funny. He's saying, "Report to headquarters immediately." And he gets up to leave, and she's like, "James, where are you going? I need you." And he's like, "So does England." And he steps out the door, but then she leans over to like a phone and makes a phone call. She's like, "Oh, he's coming." So we realize she's a traitor. So Bond takes off on his skis, and he's being pursued by that man we met earlier, the Soviet agent, as well as these other red agents. And you have this really great ski chase, culminating in an absolutely awesome stunt performance by Worth, where they fly off this cliff, and he cuts the skis, and he opens the backpack, and it's a Union Jack parachute. But what's really interesting about this,
I don't know who's paused. I don't know. I'm hoping right, it's me.
I'm right here. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. Okay. So he skis off this amazing stunt that just wowed everybody at the time, because they did it for real. I can't even remember how high this is, but it is absolutely amazing. And it opens into a parachute of the Union Jack. And sadly, at the last second during that chase, Bond did kill that Soviet agent. Yes. And this leads into the main titles: "Spy Who Loved Me," song "Nobody Does It Better." Probably say an excellent song.
Beautiful.
One of the best. The one that they picked for the tribute to Desmond Llewellyn video, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. We then come out of the sequence back into Russia, back to Moscow, where Agent Anya Amasova is reporting to General Gogol, and he regrets to inform her that this agent has been killed in line of duty. He knows, of course, that they're lovers, and she asks how it happened, and he kind of tells her that it involves something with British intelligence, and she requests to be personally notified to any updates onto this mission. He's like, okay. So we cut to Bond, and he's arriving by helicopter, as another British submarine up another harbor, and he greets M. And there we also meet Admiral Hargreaves, who will go on to be the new M, played by Robert Brown.
Yeah.
Yes, we also meet what's his name? The other character. I'm blanking on him. Jeffrey Keen's character.
As the defense secretary.
Yes, the defense secretary. He appears in a lot of Bond films, and they're telling him about what happened, and they have some new information to show to the Navy admiral. And it shows a map of where the nuclear submarine was traveling and where it was when it disappeared. So it was up in the Arctic Circle when it vanished. And the admiral's like bewildered. He's like, "How did you get this information?" And the defense secretary, "Sorry, sir, that's top secret information." And so Bond is given a lead that submarine tracking device of some kind has gone. A microfilm about submarine tracking information has gone on the black market in Egypt. And something about this, and there's a lead, and you need to go there. So then we cut to somewhere off the African coast, off the West African coast, to Atlantis, which is a very odd arachnid-shaped type thing. That's the tops of all the legs have these big gun turrets on it. There's a place for helicopters to land, and it's just so weird. And I don't really know what. I mean, Ken Adam designed this thing, and I don't know what the thinking was when they did it, because I would think it would look like something more under the sea aqua type thing rather than this scary giant black arachnid, basically.
Well, no, but I saw it like look in the corner of your screen. I thought it kind of looked a little bug-eyed octopusy. I thought it was spectre-y.
Yeah, it does remind. I guess it does remind me a little bit of Spectre. Yeah. So we're in there, and there's this beautiful room that's got a really long table on it. You got all this Renaissance artwork and paintings, and we meet our villain of the film, Carl Stromberg, played by Kurt Jurgens. He's entertaining these two scientists, and he thanks them for their work that they did on helping him with the submarine tracking technology, and he's pay them. He says the money's been about to be transferred to your accounts. Thank you very much. And before you go, there's something we need to talk about. And he says, it's come to my attention that some of this very top secret information we've been working on has been making its way out to the public, and only somebody very high up in this scheme could possibly know about it. And both the scientists are looking kind of nervous at each other, wondering what's going on. And then Stromberg randomly tells the secretary, he tells her, "Oh, man, you leave. You don't have to be here for this. I don't want you here for this." She's like, "Okay." So she leaves and goes into the elevator, but then she notices that the elevator isn't moving for quite a while. And Stromberg presses a button which opens lifts up one of the paintings so you could see this TV screen. And there's you see a shark swimming in a pool on the screen. And then he presses another button and a trapdoor opens in the elevator. She slides down this, basically I slide down into the water. And the whole time this is happening, he's playing this serene classical music in the background. And he then says over the PA speaker that, "I know it was you. You stole it, and you sold it on the black market. And this is the punishment." And she gets eaten alive by the sharks. And it's clear the message he's trying to send to the scientists, which is, "You'd better not tell anybody about this," which admittedly is rather strange that he's doing that, considering what happens in the very next scene, which is they leave to get on the helicopter, and then he presses a button and detonates the helicopter.
Yes.
And then he gets on the phone with presumably another secretary and says, "Cancel the $20 million transfer." And I'm thinking, given what your evil plan is, as revealed later in the movie, money's not going to mean anything anyway. So what does it matter?
Well, but also, in terms of your evil plotting, why would you transfer the money before you tell them that you're gonna? So they don't know. They're all excited. They're all aflutter. But it's unproven.
Exactly.
As far as they're concerned. So why did you even bother transferring the money that they're never going to know about, kill them, and then untransfer the money? Why go through that paperwork? Are you just trying to keep your employees busy?
And seeing as they're all probably going to die anyway, it's I get that maybe why he wants to kill him because he's paranoid and he doesn't want anybody else saying anything, but still, it's very weird. And no sooner than that happens, Jaws and Sandor walk in. Jaws, of course, being over 7 feet tall, played by the great Richard Kiel. Yes, Richard Kiel, always a consummate professional, very great guy at all the conventions. And he was doing conventions all the way up almost until he died. Really great guy, loves the fans, amazing guy. Sandor, by the way, I should mention, was played by Milton Reed, who also played one of Dr. No's guards. And when he heard that, when they were making Goldfinger, when he heard that the role for, he read the description, I guess, for Odd Job, and he wanted to play that role, but he knew they were looking at Harold Sakata, so he contacted Harold, and he's like, "You and I should have a wrestling match, and the winner will be cast in the movie." But the producers were like, "No, you were already in the first movie, and fans might recognize you," which maybe not. And so the wrestling match didn't take place, and the role went to Harold Sakata, which is a good thing. But it's cool that they brought him back for this movie to play Sandor. He also was a guard of some kind, I believe, or a thug in the Woody Allen Casino Royale movie. So technically he's been in 3 Ty Bond movies, which is kind of neat.
That is cool.
He does bear a physical resemblance to the character of Slugsy in the book, which is another tribute. So Stromberg tasked them with tracking down the microfilm and kill anybody who was come in contact with it. It's like, okay, no problem. So then we cut to Bond, and he's going to Egypt to meet this old college buddy of his, a sheik. And he's meeting him out in the desert, and it feels like this very Lawrence of Arabia type scene. And he's talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, the guy you're looking for is a scientist, Max Kalba, but you need to meet this other guy, Farrakesh, first." And I'm like, okay, we're talking through this, and I wasn't sure what the purpose was of having there be a multiple chain of people to go through, but okay. And I still can't figure out exactly why this guy he went to Cambridge with is out in a tent, and he has this random information. They didn't really say why he knows this about that.
He does. Okay, so when he goes to the guy in the tent, he says, "I didn't know where you would." And James Bond here, after all these years, I didn't know that what you'd do after Cambridge. And Bond says, "Well, I knew where you were going to be." And so it's kind of implied that it's kind of like Henderson, but cooler, like Henderson with a harem.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what they're doing. That's right. You're right there. And that's all the more reason because it's the same director, Lewis Gilbert.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the same thing, right? Because that's, again, I should mention that that movie was about the disappearance of these rockets. Now this is the disappearance of submarines. I wonder who's responsible.
Yeah.
And so he wants Bond to stay the night before going off on his trip, and Bond's like, "Oh no, I can't. I need to go now." And then of course this scantily clad woman walks in, and Bond's like, "Oh, but of course in Egypt one should dive into all of its aspects." Right, and then it didn't have the same cathartic type delivery, the humorous delivery that he usually does, because he says it like so dryly and seriously. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So then we cut to the city, and there's a really interesting music cue, and Bond's like walking on his way to go meet this person, and I'm like, that's really weird. It almost gave me like horror vibes or something, because you see him at the end of this long corridor, like in silhouette.
Yeah.
And they play that great music cue. It's like makes me think we're about to enter a horror movie or something. So he goes to this guy's apartment. I'm guessing it was Farakesh's apartment, but Farakesh isn't there. Instead, he's greeted by this woman, and she doesn't really want to tell Bond anything. So he turns on the charm to try and seduce her. She's like, I can't. And across the way, we see Sandor opening a window and pulling out a pistol. She screams, and Bond reacts just in the nick of time and uses her as a human shield, which,
as James Bond does.
Well, I think this is worse of an offense than saying Gold, because in Goldfinger, that lady was in on it. She knew that guy was there to kill Bond, and she was distracting him. Whereas here, it seems like she was genuinely afraid, and maybe she would have helped him if she felt more confident. And so Bond just callously uses her as a human shield.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say, like, I was curious as to whether or not, because she sees him, or she sees Sandor, and then it's like, no. And so I don't know if it's because she spun or because he spun her. But I can see how the human shield argument holds up.
Well, I think what it is that she first reacts and screams, and he can see that she's looking over in this direction, so he automatically assumes and just sends her right quick. So
yeah, might as well.
Bond runs outside and gets up onto the rooftop, and Sandor ambushes him. They get in this big fight, which ends with Sandor kind of precariously dangling off the edge of the balcony, holding onto Bond's tie. Bond's like, "Where's Farakesh? Where can I find him?" And he's like, "No. Where's Farakesh?" And he's like, Sandor's like, "Pyramids." And then Bond just casually swipes at his hand like he's swatting a fly. And
Amazing.
Sandor falls to his death. And then Bond delivers a quip. And that night he goes to the pyramids. But something about the way this sequence was shot always made it look like it was shot inside a stage. Because of the way the lights are lighting up the pyramids, it almost looks like there's a wall right behind it, as if they're in like a stage or something. Like, what's going on? And then some of the lights are changing colors. Like some of them are green and others are like pinkish red. I'm like, and it's not really clear what this presentation is. It's just a bunch of people sitting out in these chairs in front of the Sphinx, and you see Farakesh is sitting with Anya Amasova. They're talking, but we can't hear what they're talking about. And Bond sits in front of them kind of quietly, and we see Jaws standing off in the distance watching this as well.
Well, and again, it's that strike of music as well that kind of the beginning of the movie really builds up the tension of the whatever is going on. It does. It's like, okay, he's going somewhere, he's about to find somewhere, we're in an exotic place. But with Jaws, it's like the circumstantial lighting within the film highlights him. The music itself is within the movie. Everyone can hear this music. It's like, well, I forget there's a word for it. I don't know if you know, but there's that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought it was really interesting, but also it is building up how terrifying a force Jaws is until they decide not to.
Right. And I guess that's also an allusion to the fact that his name in the book was Horror, to try and play that up. But so Farakesh sees Jaws. And rather than doing the smart thing, which would have been just to stay put in the safety of the large crowd where Jaws isn't going to do anything, he strangely decides to make up some excuse to get away from Anya, and he runs deeper into the temple complex instead of running back, presumably to the main road where their cars are or whatever. And to this day, I can't figure out why he decides to do this, because Jaws is already standing over by one of the temple complexes, away from the main road, away from all the people. And so his decision is to run to another very isolated area and go into a temple complex, which, what, do you think there's a back door or something? I mean, I couldn't really figure out his logic in doing this, but Jaws follows him in there, and he uses his steel teeth to break the chain on the gate. And as he's walking through here, I'm reminded of the Egyptian temple bonus level from the GoldenEye 64 game. It's like, this is great, or the Aztec complex. And Jaws is wearing this big blue blazer, a nice khaki long pants, looking like he's dressed to the nines, ready to go. And eventually he corners Farakesh, and rather than just throttling him, he decides to do the whole Dracula thing and bites him on the throat to kill him.
Yeah,
Bond
quite bloodless when he emerges.
Yes, yeah, he is. And then Bond surreptitiously goes in there, sneaks in there. He finds Farakesh dead. He turns to leave, and then he sees Anya because he can't find the microphone. She's like, "Where's Farakesh?" She's like, "Oh, he's dead. You killed him?" No, somebody else did. And all of a sudden, he's ambushed by these thugs, and he defeats them easily. And he bids goodbye to goodbye to Anya, and he's not going to press the matter as to why she's even concerned about it, surprisingly. So he leaves, and then it's either the next night that he's at a club now of some kind or a restaurant to meet Max Kalba. I don't know how, I can't remember how exactly he found Kalba, because his buddy, the Sheik, told him, you need to find Farrakesh if you need to find Kalba. But he wasn't able to ask Farrakesh anything before Farrakesh was murdered. And now all of a sudden he's in the restaurant meeting Max Kalba.
Oh. No, because I remember.
Did he have something in Farrakesh? Did Farrakesh have something in his pocket? I should remember this. I've watched it twice.
Well, this is the first time we've ever been stumbled on a plot point. I understand completely Farrakesh running away, and it's like, why did that happen? Because movie. But okay, so how did he get to Kalba? I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall, because he finds him in there dead, and I don't recall. Oh, wait a minute. I remember now. That's right, I remember. See, as we're thinking out loud, I'm starting to remember. He pulled out a little notebook in Farrakesh's pocket that said Kalba dinner meeting. Okay, now I remember. So it's the dinner meeting. So cool. He does, but saying it, he didn't tell Anya this, but I'm guessing Farrakesh told Anya, because she shows up at the restaurant too.
Yes.
And he's talking to Kalba, and he's making a bid for the microfilm, but then Anya walks in and says, I want to bid on it too. And he's kind of interested in he's like kind of surprised by this, but then he gets a notice that, there's a phone call for you. And he's like, okay. So he excuses himself briefly. He goes into the smaller phone booths, which are like these little alcoves with privacy doors. And Jaws, who is driven up alongside this restaurant, disguised as like a telephone repairman or somebody, walks in there, coming out of one of the other phone booths, and steps in and kills Kalba, once again doing the Count Dracula thing, biting him.
There is blood this time, though.
There is blood this time. And Bond and Anya get kind of impatient waiting, figuring out what's going on. Or Bond gets impatient waiting, rather, and he goes to check on him, finds him dead. He spots Jaws sneaking out the back. He carefully follows him out there, and he sees Jaws get in his utility truck and start driving away. Bond sneaks into the back of the van, and lo and behold, Anya has already beaten them there somehow, even though it seemed like he left the table before she did. So they're in the van, and little do they know, Jaws is able to record their conversation. He can hear their conversation, and he realizes, okay, I've got this British and Soviet agent back here. They know about the microfilm. So he drives them all the way up to Karnak, which is quite a long distance from Cairo, where the pyramids are. About midway down the Nile.
There's even a reprise of Nobody Does It Better during the car ride. That's how long this car ride is.
Yes, so he drives them into Karnak, and they get out of the back of the car, and they start they look around, and Jaws is missing. Like, where is he? And they start wandering around the temple complex at Karnak. And this really neat thing is you see, like, in one shot, Jaws is way up on the top walking along the rafters. Like, how did he get up there? And it's kind of creepy. It's like, what's he doing up there? And then another shot, you see him down another quarter way up high on walking along the stone parapet. And it's like, you don't really think about the lack of logic to it as to how he got up there or why he's even up there. But it's still kind of eerie, because he's like this horror wandering around that you have to be aware of. And eventually he comes out and he gets in this big fight scene, and Anya pulls a gun on him and tells him to get out of the way, but he, it beats her at it pretty quickly. They end up dropping a rock on him, and he keeps fighting him some more, and she ends up jumping into the car, and she's like, give me the keys, and Bond is being all coy about it because he doesn't
hang on a second. This is where we've switched over from like what Jaws being scary, and now we've just turned you've seen him as a horror, and maybe it's the
beginning of the sequence when they're building up
and he's a horror, but then all of a sudden he turns into like Herman Munster.
Exactly. Like in one instance, I think he actually drops a boulder on his foot.
Yes.
Even though this boulder is big enough that it would have crushed his foot. He just also kind of does the monster thing.
He knows they're in the back. Why did he leave the keys in the ignition?
And why did he leave the microfilm he knows that the microfilm, the necessary information isn't on there anyway, but it's like, on the one hand, which is something that Bond mentions later, that the microfilm isn't even that useful. It's like, if that's the case, then why have you been chasing the damn microfilm? Maybe you thought it would lead to, and if anything, you should be tracing back where how the microfilm ended up in Egypt in the first place, as opposed to going forward. But whatever. Like you said, the movie, it's just movie reasons. So Bond and Anya get back in the car. Bond gets the microfilm from the little ashtray thing on the dashboard, and she's trying to start the car, and Bond's being kind of coy with her about the keys, while Jaws is literally ripping apart this truck like a tin can opener. So eventually she drives it, and Bond
broken glass. No broken glass.
Yeah, Bond even makes a quip at one point, like how women drivers, because Jaws is holding the car back and she can't get away. And she's like, oh, just wait a minute, watch this. And she slams the car in reverse and knocks Jaws against the wall. And she's like, shaken, not stirred. And Bond's like,
that was good.
And that's where yeah, okay. And so they take off, and because they got the microfilm, they assume Jaws is either dead or defeated. So they start driving off into the desert, and then they start
with this ridiculous circus music.
Exactly. It shifts into this circus music, and of course the car just falls apart. It's done. They get out and they realize they have to walk, while Bond's in his tux and she's in this really dark dress, something they homaged in Quantum of Solace, where they've now got to walk across the desert, and they use the Lawrence of Arabia music just because. And it's like, yeah, I don't think you walked this far, even though the movie's suggesting that you did. They eventually come upon this boat, and they pay for at first. It's kind of funny. He shouts something in Egyptian or whatever, and he immediately gets on the guy's boat before he even asks permission. And he's like, oh, he'll take us to Cairo. And she's like, oh, good. So they're in the boat, and they're kind of flirting with each other as they're heading down the Nile, and Bond thinks he's about to score, and instead she sprays him with like some knockout gas, I guess.
Yeah, it's a surreptitious KGB knockout cigarette.
Yes, and so he wakes up, and they're back at the dock, and of course the other guys on the boat didn't bother waking him up, and he's like, where is she? And like, I don't know. So Bond gets off the boat. Yeah, and so that's actually funny, because they couldn't have been going to Cairo, because Cairo is north of Karnak, whereas the Abu Simbel temple monument that Bond passes as he's walking into the new MI6 headquarters is far south, nearly over at the southern tip of the country. So that's a geographic error, unless they're suggesting that Bond walked all the way from Cairo down to the southern end of the country, because they do show him walking past that pyramid complex. Like he's not driving or hitching a ride with anybody. So that's like, okay, I guess he just walked across the country. So he goes past, and for some reason, this temple complex, which is out in the middle of nowhere, but there is an MI6 base out here.
Yes.
Probably second most ridiculous location to have one, given the extreme geographic isolation of this location. So Bond goes into this nice, it's designed to almost look like the inside of an actual Egyptian mummy's tomb, like from the Valley of the Kings even, which is like, okay, I'm not really sure why, but okay. So Bond walks in there and he sees Moneypenny at the desk. He's not, he expected that. He's kind of flirts with her a bit, but then he's shocked to see General Gogol. And they have this really great music cue, and Bond's kind of walking around the pillars, like watching him like he's a tiger in a cage or something, wondering what's going to happen. And he greets him and is kind of cordial about it. And then M walks in. He's like, oh, good, Bond, you're here. It's like
I thought you would comment on how actually pleasant M is to Bond in this film. It's like he's showing off his son to this is going to be your new father-in-law. Like, there is a very familial sort of relationship in this one. And you're right. Before, I never really noticed, wow, M's a dick to Roger Moore. We talked about it last week. This time it's like, oh, James, you're doing so well.
Right. And and of course, it's all bullshit, because he just wants to show off in front of Alexei. And he actually mentions that when they're going down the hall, and he's like, oh, you first, Alexei. He's like, no, Miles, you first.
I thought everybody's using the real names in this one. It's not M and Q. It's Miles and Major Boothroyd.
Well, Miles and Alexei at this moment. So, yes, they walk down the corridor, and you see the classic montage of all the crazy gadgets that Q is working on. One is like a spring-loaded seat with like a spiral design on it that launches you in the air. Another one shoots like a bunch of black paint out, and a bunch of crazy stuff. And then he comes
show with a knife through an eye, and
he comes upon Q, who's got this tea set up on like these. Setting the plate down on like a row of magnets or whatever, and it flies forward and it decapitates the guy, the statue at the end of the table, or the mannequin, I should say. And Q's like, good, have that ready for Ahmed's tea party. And so then they go into the side room of the projector to read the microfilm. And she's talking, and Anya is there, and she's talking about how easily it was to retrieve the microfilm. And, Bond kind of shrugs it off, and he says, yeah, well, it's not really useful to you anyway, so I don't know what you're bragging about, type of thing. She's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, the important things have been removed. It's all useless, which technically isn't. It's a half truth, because yes, the important things in the microfilm are removed, but it's actually not entirely true, because when they look at it on the overhead projector, Bond notices this thing in the corner, and he's like, Q, what's that? And He's like, oh, it must be something that was sitting underneath the document when they took the picture, and they zoom in on it, and the word that says like oratory, and Gogol's like, what's that? And Bond's like, oh, it's a church, blah blah blah. And she's like, and then Anya interrupts and says, well, the symbol on it is actually a fish from the Stromberg Fishing Company. And so Bond realizes that oratory is actually a laboratory. And then, of course, you have the classic cliche, ridiculous line coming from the defense secretary. It's like, Carl Stromberg, he's a rich shipping
He's
man.
the richest man.
He could not be involved, no. But Gogol is impressed by both Bond and Anya's attention to detail. And he's like, oh, I'm sure you're both going to do very well together on this mission. And they kind of look at each other like, oh, we're together now. And then Bond looks to M, who's like, yep. And then they get the mission to go. You're going to go undercover to go and meet Stromberg. So they take he said, Bond says it's in one place, I can't remember the name, where she's like, actually, it's in Sardinia. So, yes,
right.
Which is apparently where Atlantis is at this moment. So, which is another geographic error the film makes, which I'll get to later.
Okay.
So Bond and Anya take the train, and they're on the train. This would be a very long train trip unless they took a plane somewhere first, because Sardinia is quite a ways, and way out in the Mediterranean. So they're on the train, and Bond offers her a nightcap, as it were, and she's like, "No, we're gonna have a busy day tomorrow. I'd rather get a lot of sleep." He's like, "Okay." She changes out of her into her nightgown, and she goes to hang her robe up in the closet. And there's a little back and forth briefly where it cuts to Bond in his room, and he's almost half expecting her to actually come in, and she's almost half like thinking twice about whether or not she should actually go back into his room. And instead, she opens the closet to hang it. And you have a great jump scare moment where Jaws is just in the closet, and the expression on his face, because he's leaning down because he can barely fit in there, and he's like dull like that with the teeth, and it's like she screams. And at first, Bond isn't sure if he heard it or not, and then he starts like fighting. And Bond opens the door, and he sees that Jaws is once again doing the Count Dracula thing, and he takes the bottle. Bond just smashes it over Jaws, and he picks up Bond and slams him into the ceiling and starts choking him. And this gets like a vicious fight back and forth, where multiple times Jaws tries to bite Bond with the cold Count Dracula maneuver, and this prompts Bond to grab a lamp. He smashes the bulb, but it's still plugged in, so it's still working. And Jaws, for some reason, doesn't simply close his mouth. There's nothing stopping him from closing his jaws. He just leaves his jaws open, and Bond reaches over and presses the electric bulb the wires from the bulb into his teeth, and that electrifies Jaws, allowing Bond to kick him out the window of the train. Jaws tumbles down the fence, and you see these sparks go off, almost like he went through probably a barbed wire fence and had these sparks over. And he gets up, and it's clear that he survived, and he just kind of dusts himself off and walks away, which is a neat little joke they do have Jaws do all the time, which he also did in Karnak. So Jaws walks off, and we'll see him later at some point. So we get to Sardinia, and Bond and Anya, they go to Sardinia, and they check into this hotel, and their covers as marine biologists, and they've had a meeting scheduled with Stromberg. It's like, oh, cool. They get picked up by Nomi, or Naomi, I should say. Naomi, another beautiful woman. She's like, oh, here, take you to Stromberg, whatever. So they get on this motorboat, and they take off into the ocean, and they get to Atlantis, and you have the great music, and how great this place is. And Anya goes on like a separate tour with Naomi, whereas Bond goes into Stromberg's main little sitting lounge, which this private lounge we haven't seen before because it's not the main dining area. It's like a neat, like I would love to have a little lounge like this where you have it's like under the water, so you see all the marine life and stuff all the way around, and he has like nice chairs and lounges and neat little designs, and he's greeting Stromberg. He's like, how you doing? And he basically tells him that, yes, why go to space when 7/10 of our own world has remained unexplored? And Bond is like
very intense.
Yeah, and Bond's talking about how impressed he is by the setup he has here, and how it's going to inspire him to continue his research. And Stromberg's, oh, I'm very happy about that. And he's like, oh, I should show you this, sir. And he shows him this model that he has of Atlantis, showing that it can go underwater, and then it's like anchored on these concrete pillars, which bring it down. And there's like these spheres underwater with like this whole underwater city. And Bond's looking at it, says, oh, what a great prototype or imagination or so over the future or whatever. Stromberg, no, it is the future, sir. And it's like, and then he says basically goodbye to him. And it's not really clear in the movie why Stromberg has even agreed to host them, or why he doesn't, because he suspects obviously that he sees through the ruse that this is James Bond and that Anya is, Agent XXX. But it's like, okay, if you saw that, then why didn't you do the maneuver where you just put him in the elevator and drop him into the shark tank to begin with, rather than even going through the motions of hosting them and then going on this what will be a ridiculously elaborate assassination attempt.
Well, and if we'd stuck with the Blofeld plot line, they would have met in disguises and they never would have recognized each other. So what does it matter?
Yeah, because I was figuring that out both times I was watching. I'm like, why is he even bothering meeting with this guy if you can just kill him? Okay. So, and it was kind of an uneventful meeting, I have to say, for hero and villain, because Stromberg's basic gist is like, hi, I like ocean exploration more than space exploration. Here, check out my model. Okay, see you later. And
well, he wants to live under the sea.
Yeah, and like you said, he's very intense. Oh, I forgot to mention he has these webbed.
Yes, Mr. Stromberg does not shake hands, so because he's got he's Aquaman. He's evil Aquaman with money. He's Bruce Wayne Aquaman.
So Bond leaves the room and he comes upon Anya, and Anya draws Bond's attention to this model of the Liparus. And Naomi's talking about, oh, it's a super tanker, blah, blah, blah. And then Bond's like, oh, they take interest in it. And they leave. And then Jaws enters Stromberg's lounge. And a gimmick I forgot to mention is every time Stromberg's in the movie, he's eating something. And he's sitting in his chair this time and he's eating peanuts. And he's like, wait till they get back to the mainland and kill him, which is great. So they get escorted back to the mainland where they meet a boat at the dock. And driving off the boat is the Lotus Esprit driven by Q. And Bond greets Q. He's like, hi, it's good morning, 007. And Anya walks up, and Q's very polite to the lady. He's like, oh, yes. She's like, oh, good morning, Major Boothroyd, which is, again, canon, bringing his name back from Russia with Love. And he opens the door for her. She gets in the car, and he mentions something about bringing the thing back in one piece, as usual. And Bond's like, of course. And he's like, yeah, I do believe. So he slams the door, and he has I love it. He leaves this big sigh, like, heaving a sigh as if he knows that he's not going to get the car back in one piece, which ironically he actually will, I believe, in this one. They don't destroy this car. So the Esprit takes
a little wet.
Yeah. So it's not really clear even in this scene why Q is there to give him the car. It's like you visited Stromberg, you have your lead being the Liparus supertanker. Or we'll find out that it's the lead when he gets there. So why is Q even meeting him here to randomly get him the car so they could just go on some random drive? I mean, it's not clear at all why this scene is here. It's like they basically came up with an awesome action scene for a car that they felt they needed. So let's just have Q show up here and just give him a car. It makes no sense.
No.
Okay. So they take off driving along the coast, and this motorcyclist comes up behind them and it has a sidecar with a rocket launcher on it. They fire, and Bond zooms out of the way and it blows up the trailer of this truck. And they keep on going. And
see, I've already forgotten why they're here. It's already amazing.
Yeah, so they ram the car. He rams the car against the motorcycle. It flies off the cliff and glances into the water. And then a helicopter or another car comes off a side road, and it's Jaws. How he got here this quickly, I don't know. Jaws is leaning out of the car, firing his machine gun at them, and they're trying to avoid it. And eventually they get Jaws to swerve off the road, and his car finally goes off a cliff, crashes into this like farmer's house or whatever. And the guy's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And Jaws just again steps out, and he's just brushing off the dust like it's no big deal, and walks away.
Even looks at the guy like, "Get out of my face."
And then Naomi shows up again in her helicopter, and she's following Bond, smiling, and she doesn't care about causing a public nuisance or public destruction, given what Stromberg's plan is. It's not going to matter anyway. So she just starts opening fire with this big Gatling or minigun on the helicopter, and Bond has to try and dodge it. And he drives down to the beach, drives right off the dock, and crashes into the water in a great shot. And Anya thinks he's crazy. What are you doing? And then the car transforms into a submarine, and it's really awesome because they designed a model that would do this.
They launched directly into Thunderball.
Yeah. So they're driving underwater as a submarine for a little bit, and Bond uses a missile launch from the car to destroy Naomi's helicopter and kills her. Then he decides to take the opportunity to travel back to the Atlantis to get a closer look. But they're intercepted by these mini subs from Stromberg, and they have to fight them off, and they destroy them. And eventually they go back to the beach, and they're driving up out of the water, and you have everybody stopping to look at this crazy car coming out of the sea. And you have one of the assistant directors for the Italian unit, played by Victor Straczynski, in a gimmick which he will repeat in 3 Bond films consecutively, where he's looking at the car come out of the water, and he looks at his wine bottle like, what the hell, am I drunk or something, as the car drives by. So that was like a little one of three tip of the hats to that little gag that they use. Which surprisingly they get away with it 3 movies in a row, even because it becomes like an in joke.
I'm gonna have to look out for the third one. I'm only familiar with 2.
Shall I tell you what it is?
No.
No, okay. So they take off and and then they drive away and they eventually go back to headquarters or whatever. And they find it. And the lead with the Liparus that they've discovered is that the Liparus supertanker they can look up its manifest and they find out that it set sail 10 months ago, but it's never made port since then. And like, well, that's really suspicious. And even though it's a supertanker, it hasn't been collecting oil or anything like that. So what the hell is it doing out there? And they track where it is, and it's off the coast of West Africa someplace. So this M tells Bond, well, we're going to pair you up with a U.S. submarine captain, the USS Wayne. Captain's like, okay. So Bond and Anya are back at the hotel, and they may have
and
been
the plot thickens.
Actually, I think maybe they went to the hotel before they went back to headquarters. So anyway, they're at the hotel and they're making small talk. And Bond mentions that he happened to be in the Austrian Alps. And
well, no, she goes to have a cigarette lit, and he pulls out a lighter and lights it. And she says, "Oh, that's interesting." He says, "Yeah, I picked it up when I was in Berngarten 3 weeks ago." And she's like, "Do you recognize this man?" And so she pulls out a picture of her lover from the pre-title sequence, and he's like, "Nope. No idea." And it's like he was the man I loved, and he was in Berngarten and he was killed. And did you kill him? And Bond is like, this is actually pretty. There's a couple of moments in this where Roger Moore is like, okay, you're being James Bond, you're not being Roger Moore, and I dig it. So he says, when you're traveling downhill on skis in the snow at 40 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, you don't really pay attention to the person who's trying to put a bullet in your back. And she's like, well, and he's like, well, yeah, I was there. I killed people. Yeah, I killed them. Yeah, it's true. So fuck it. And she says, well, then when this is over, I'm going to kill you. And he just sort of is like, all right.
I really like Roger's acting in this scene as well. Like you said, he's James Bond. He's very tough about it. No apologies. And I love how impersonal it is too, because at first he's being honest when he tells her at first that he doesn't recognize the guy. But then when she tells him specifically about what happened, he realizes that, well, then therefore it must have been me. But he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I love this scene, and it's horrible that there's no payoff to it, because this whole movie has been, I'll get to this actually when we finish the review. But anyway, so she's like, I'm going to kill you when this is over. Like, okay. So then they go back to headquarters, and that's when they find out about the Liparus and where it is, and they team him up with the USS Wayne, where we meet Shane Rimmer's character. And this is where they do a good job at improving on what would be the climax if you only live twice. They do this much better. So they're on the submarine, and they actually have this funny bit where one of the ensigns walks into Shane's office to talk to him, and he sees Anya in the shower. And she's like, what? You never seen a
major take a shower before?
Yeah. He's like, okay. And he leaves, gives him the paperwork, and
hang on. So we go, and they're basically searching for the tanker. They check out the tanker, and they've got the periscope, and all of a sudden, same thing happens again. They lose sight of the tanker. Power goes down, so they've got to surface, and they're looking around, and it's like it's right behind us, which is impossible. He does say it's impossible, but I'm just like, yeah, there's no way that thing moved that fast. Yeah,
and I don't recall if they ever explained why the power what allows the Liparus to knock the power out on the submarines.
I don't know.
Nothing. Yeah. So the submarine opens, and we realize that this is not a super tanker for oil. It's in fact a floating submarine dock. Clever type of design, the way the thing works, like it opens. You would think that it would flood with enough water to start offsetting it, but somehow it kind of works, because the submarine has to go from floating in the water inside, and the bottom of the ship would have to open a bit too, but you only see the top of it open. So it's really weird. So anyway, the submarine goes in, and we see the other 2 nuclear submarines that have been stolen, the Soviet and the American, or the British one. And then now they've got the American submarine, and they're all lined up, and you have all of these red shirt guards show up with machine guns, and the captain of the tanker along with Stromberg come up, and they take this device that they put onto the outside of the submarine that I guess allows them to talk on a speaker in there. And Stromberg tells them that you have exactly 2 minutes to come out. And it's frustrating they didn't give Shane Rimmer's character a name. He's just the captain. So whatever. I'm just gonna call him Shane. So Shane turns to Bond, and he's like, "Well, Commander, what do we do?" And Bond's like, "Well, there's no alternative." Which I'm thinking, well, there is an alternative. You could fire a torpedo and maybe, or something. But
well, they'd plugged in cyanide gas, and so as soon as they started to resist or do anything, even if you blow a hole in the thing.
Yeah, I guess that's true. So Bond's like, okay, let's come out. So they come out, and they're all rounded up, and their guards are taken away into prison cells. And Stromberg Bond tells Anya to keep her head down because he notices that there's this big camera, gyroscopic camera being moved along on the roof, sliding across or on the ceiling, and she keeps her head down, but one of the guards notices something and flicks his hand to knock off her hat, showing her long hair. And then Bond actually says her name at that point, which is like Anya. Then they try and get in a fight, but they're cornered immediately. And Stromberg orders that that Anya be taken with him, and that Bond come up here, and they go behind these blast doors into the main control room, I guess, where you have a ridiculously huge sphere of the Earth, and you see the Liparus is off the coast of West Africa, and the other two submarines with the crew of red shirts take off and leave the Liparus with the nuclear weapons still on board. And the Stromberg finally unveils what his evil plan is. He's going to launch a nuclear missile from the Soviet submarine at New York City, and then he's going to launch the nuclear missile from the American submarine at Moscow, and that will provoke nuclear war, wiping out humanity and all of this. Never mind the fact that the radiation will devastate the aquatic undersea life as well. No clue as to why he actually wants to do this. Like, if you want to live underwater Atlantis, why don't you just do that? There's literally no reason to do this. Unless he's worried that by not paying his bills that he would have everything confiscated and therefore he needs to destroy the global economy so that they don't bug him. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, that's great speculation. The movie should have said something about that, but no, all we get is he is literally Sebastian the Crab from The Little Mermaid. Everything is better under the sea. Homer, that is your answer to everything. Stromberg, you are a weird, weird dude. I don't care that your thumbs make it hard to play Nintendo.
Yes, and we never learn why all of his goons are involved in this, as we usually don't.
Well, he's just one of the richest industrialists in the world, so he's got like a staff, they do stuff for him.
It's not going to mean anything if he succeeds in this.
No, but they get to live under the sea.
Yeah. So Stromberg bids Bond goodbye, but he takes Anya with him. They take off on a little monorail, and then they get ejected from the back of the Liparus in this motorboat, and it's clearly a little model toy with action figures in it. It's really egregious. And the boat just kind of, it takes off. And Bond, realizing that they're in danger, decides that, we have to mount this insurrection. And sure enough, he gets a hold of one of his guards and knocks the gun out of the way. And he starts firing and taking off. And he breaks into the main cell and frees the Americans and says, go free the British and the Soviets and raid the armory. They're like, hey, so you have an awesome gunfight and a big battle in the Liparus. And what's awesome about this compared to the big fight in You Only Live Twice is that Bond is directly involved in the action. Whereas in You Only Live Twice, Bond and Blofeld are off doing their own thing, and it just keeps cutting to these gratuitous shots of giant armies of extras fighting each other. Yep. Whereas here, there's actually a whole storyline as to the logic of how they're going to stage this rebellion, how they're going to try and breach the main control room area because the blast doors have been put up, and they have to fight all their way down the length of the supertanker to get there. And then Shane Rimmer's character, throws more grenades and stuff at it, but they can't get in because it's sealed. And like, what are we gonna do? And Bond's like, I'm gonna go to the armory. He's like, what do you expect to find there? A nuclear weapon. He's like, wait, oh, what? What are you doing? So they go to the armory and they uncork one of the other nuclear weapons that will not be used in this plot because they're only gonna fire two. And
did you say uncork?
Basically, that's what he's doing. He's uncorking the bomb, and
makes sense.
He removes the detonator from it so that he can make a safe detonation without the whole nuclear effect, so to speak. He then does this really clever thing where he carries what's got to be a ridiculously heavy plutonium charge for the bomb, and he climbs on top of the gyroscopic camera so that way the guys in the control room can't see him as it wheels all the way up back towards the control room, and he just drops his bomb right at the base. And it's set on a timer for like 1 minute, but then because the plot demanded it, for some reason, the rack that Bond's on just stops moving, and he panics, and it gets down to nearly 5 seconds when it finally turns back on. The explosion goes off. The control room center is open, and all of the red shirts who are in there, it's like they skip the part where they either get shot or disappeared because they all the guys in blue, they storm inside there, and most of the red shirts are either gone or they're lying over dead. It's like they kind of skipped the gunfight of them charging. I guess the explosion was big.
I took it as the explosion. This is the only time a concussion is actually.
Yeah, even though the giant sphere is left there undamaged, and so they storm inside, and There were other good moments in this action scene as well, like one of the younger lieutenants or whatever. Oh, I'll lead the charge, Captain, and gets gunned down as well.
Yeah.
Really great action because they're setting off legit explosions and electrical cords and throwing people off the balconies and throwing grenades everywhere. But really excellent choreography. So really,
well, not only that, but in the super tanker, and I'd be remiss, it was Ken Adam with the production design. And this was the movie because it was the new studio and everything like that. This is the one that Kubrick came in to help light.
Yes, I think he would use it at some point for The Shining, I believe.
Right.
I'm not sure if The Shining. I can't remember if that's the same stage which burned down as a result of Kubrick. Because I know when Empire Strikes Back was supposed to use one of the stages, they couldn't and got delayed because Kubrick accidentally burned down one of his studios with something had to do with the oxygen tanks or something, some type of mishap. But I know there was a fire at the 007 stage, but I'm not sure if that was the same one. I'd have to.
No, but I thought this set specifically was the one that Kubrick actually helped light.
He may have.
Okay.
I don't actually remember that. He might. I think he might be onto something. He might have. So yeah, this is an excellent sequence. So Bond confronts the captain of the Liparus, who's been injured, I guess, by the explosion or has caught a bullet. He's like, "You're too late, Bond. The submarine's already got on fire. There's nothing you can do to stop it." And he pathetically rolls over dead. And it's like, I'm not gonna lie.
No,
I wanted Bond to beat the shit out of this guy because, again, this guy has no motivation for what he's doing. He's just very nonchalant. And, yeah, I'm gonna exterminate everybody. It's like, yeah, fuck you. So, so he just dies, and then Shane Rimmer's like, what are we gonna do? There's nothing. And Bond's like, well, we can't stop the submarines. We'll just reprogram the missiles. He's like, oh, cool. So then they team up and they do that, and then we see the missiles both get launched, and we watch it on the sphere as the model is, the missiles are both flying. They almost crash into each other. They miss, and they go down, and they hit the water, and then you have two nuclear explosions. First time in a Bond film, and only time in a Bond film where you have nuclear explosions going off as a result of the villain's machinations.
Yeah.
So both the Soviet and British nuclear submarines are destroyed. Fortunately, they only had Stromberg's red shirts on it, so no innocent civilians were killed. Other than maybe some innocent fish who are going to be toxified, and maybe that's where we get Godzilla.
Lots of innocent fish.
Yes. So then the tanker suddenly starts blowing up and going into its death throes.
Yeah, self-destruct, I guess?
Yeah, I guess maybe some fire was out of control below decks or something. I don't really know. So Rimmer gives the order, everybody get back on the submarine now, spread the word. And they all get back on the submarine, and then it goes agonizingly slowly as they fire a torpedo, first of all, to blow open the doors. And it goes so slowly as the tanker's bursting into flames, and we see the set falling apart, and it's awesome. And the submarine manages to get clear of the Liparus as it sinks and is completely destroyed. Then Rimmer
yay!
Yay! Rimmer gets an order from his superiors to destroy Atlantis. And
the Pentagon.
Because I assume he would have told them that, well, the nukes are secured, the other ones are gone, so you couldn't just raid Liparus, but I guess they're saying, or raid Atlantis, but they're like, no, we're going to blow it up. It's like, okay. And they give him you have to do it right now, and in 5 minutes, and Bond's like, I need an hour, I have to save Anya. And he's like, I can't give you an hour, maybe 40 minutes. And he's like, I need this. And he's like, okay, I'll give you an hour, but I can be court-martialed for this. And he's like, how are you gonna get there? And he's like, oh, bring me the package that Q sent me. I'm like, okay, and they unpack it. And it would have been much better to just have him. It's weird because he's like, how are you gonna unpack this thing? And then he takes off again
in the captain's cabin. Yeah,
like an action figure type thing with the jet ski flying out, and Bond's flying on the racing on the water to get to Atlantis, and he boards. He goes inside, and
it's a skidoo, like a sea-doo. It's one of the first one. It was big, or it was a prototype, or something like that. And
so the issue here is that the submarines and the Liparus were shown on the multiple times in the spherical model to be off, or the Liparus anyway was off West Africa. But Atlantis, when they went to see it, was in Sardinia, and Atlantis doesn't look like something that moves because you look at the model, and it sits down next to this underwater city, and it's anchored in the concrete or whatever. It raises up and raises down. So are we to believe? So is the idea that Stromberg took this little motorboat and went all the way from the Liparus off West Africa all the way to Sardinia? And
that's right.
And now the submarine, I guess, is sailed all the way out there as well.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, geographically, it makes no sense. But anyway, Bond boards the Atlantis, and strangely, there's no resistance at all. He just walks right into the main apparatus that Stromberg is on the PA system and says, "Oh, Bond, take the elevator." It's like, okay. And we know this is probably a trap. And Bond, fortunately, is smart enough to foresee that as well. And so once the elevator shows up, Stromberg's surprised to see Bond standing in there. He's like, "Oh, yes, you told me just to drop in." And he's anchoring his feet or on the edges so he wouldn't have fallen through the trap door. So Bond steps in and he has his gun. And it's not, Stromberg strangely isn't fazed at all by the fact that his evil plan has been thwarted and that he's basically done for. He's just kind of sitting there eating again.
Yeah, which is weird. His affinity. Weird. Yeah, like he was having oysters.
Yeah, he's.
Is the implication that he because Anya's tied up somewhere?
Yeah, she's tied up. I forgot. Yeah, she's tied up in the other lounge we saw earlier, and she's
in his office.
He stroked her hair, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but you need to be restrained or whatever. You're so wild." And it's like, okay, typical Bond villain thing. But he's so nonplussed by Bond's arrival and the fact that they're about to be done for. Is he trying to save face? I don't know, but Bond sits down at the table, and Stromberg, with this gun that he's got, that tube runs the length of underneath the table, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately for Stromberg, it wasn't loaded with bullets. It was loaded with some odd mini grenade type thing, which gave Bond enough time to jump out of the way before it impacts the chair and blows up. And
right.
Jumps back on the table, and he says, "Oh, yeah, you fired yours, now it's mine." And he fires twice through that tube, striking Stromberg in the gut. And what I would argue is probably the most brutal Bond villain death in the franchise. Bond deliberately gets up and starts walking down the length of this very long table with this really angry look on his face as he very deliberately and maliciously plugs Stromberg 3 more times.
Yeah. It's a lot more emotion than he deserves.
Yeah, and that's a bit out of character for Roger's Bond. He's never really been that emotionally invested, so to speak. Like when he kills the villain, it's usually a result of them getting in a fight and he had to defend himself. But this was like an outright murder. Like you already shot him twice in the gut, and it's clear he's not winning any Olympic medals for track and field, so you pretty much neutralized the bad guy. But Bond makes a point of walking all the way down the length of this table, looking really angry, and just bam, bam, bam. I'm like, damn. And yet Roger didn't really have a problem with this. He had a problem with the killing Locke and For Your Eyes Only and stuff, and Zorin killing his minions in View to a Kill. But he didn't have a problem with this, even though I thought this was always a bit brutal to me. I mean, not brutal in terms of the actual violence of how the villain dies, just the method and Bond's whole attitude about it. I've never seen Bond be that angry, and because it's such an emotionless scene, like you're saying. It's like they're in a room. It's not on fire. They're not racing the car. It's like very calm, and yet he's just really pissed off when he does it.
Well, and he sits. I don't understand why James Bond sits down. But this is also the part, and this was also, I wasn't being derisive towards Steve. This is where Stromberg has the Tabasco, and and for just a brief second, I was like, it would have been really cool if Knick Knack had shown up just for the end.
And it's so weird that the Tabasco's sitting there, because you look at how gorgeous this room is and how and this is like gold and silver plated silverware type of room, and you got a little simple refrigerator jar of Tabasco sauce on the table.
Yep. Well, it's good. It's good with oysters, but I just wanted. Anyway, and so that was brought to you by Tabasco.
Yeah, and in a comical bit, probably an egregious bit of product placement there. And in a comical bit, the last shot of Stromberg is like a close up as he's falling off the table and his food is falling over in his face. And it's like, okay, you're making him look really, trying to, So Bond steps out of the room, and
anyway, he did.
He's trying to look for Anya, but then out of the blue, Jaws shows up. It's like, oh, Jaws is here. Jaws quickly dodges him by going down one corridor, and rather than follow him, Bond kind of stays put for a second, and Jaws bounces out of another corridor, Scooby-Doo style, and grabs Bond, and he runs from him and gets up in the elevator, and they're back into the main pool area where the sharks are, and Jaws is coming at Bond again, and they're about to fight, and Bond hits the switch that has a magnet there, and he does the typical thing where Bond kind of goes, like Roger's Bond, I should say, like this, and to distract Jaws' attention, he looks up, and his teeth are just sucked onto the magnet. Now, I would have imagined that these teeth would have been sucked out of his mouth, stuck on that, rather than holding his entire body weight as the magnet is being moved over the pool.
I think it's one of those weird sort of visual setup and payoffs because Bond does shoot Jaws in the teeth, and it just it's sort of like one of those things. I think like most of his skull has been replaced with metal.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that he shot him right in the teeth. I'm like, Bond, you didn't aim very well there. Okay.
Right in the head? Come on.
Well, yeah, right in the teeth where it bounces off instead of just shooting him in the heart or something. But
how was he supposed to? When was the last time James? Never mind.
Well, the guy, Jaws was standing right in front of him, point blank range. You just aim fire.
Well, it wasn't point blank, but anyway, I'm just saying if that was his aim and he hit any part of Jaws's head, I would say it's a pretty good shot.
Right, that's a pretty good pot shot to hit the teeth, even though he needed to hit the head. But okay, whatever. So he moves the magnet along, and Jaws is dangling from it, and his nose would probably have been crushed as well because it smashed right up against that magnet. And he moves the magnet over the pool, and then he shuts it down. Jaws falls into the water and immediately goes to war with the shark. And in a great bit, Jaws does the Count Dracula move on the shark, and it works, and he kills the shark, which is amazing. And Bond runs into Stromberg's little side lounge and finds Anya there, and he's cutting her loose, and she says, "Where's Stromberg?" And rather than having a classic Bond quip, which this movie would be suitable for, Bond once again very angrily, even at the thought of Stromberg, he's like, "Dead." And he's like, "And we'll be too if we don't get out of here." So they take off, and then Shane Rimmer realizes he can't wait any longer, so he fires the torpedoes, blasting one of the Atlantis's legs, and so it's tilted and it starts sinking, taking on water, and Bond and Anya are desperately trying to escape, and and Jaws manages to make his escape as well. Bond and Anya get in this very odd.
Wait, before we get on the escape pod, I would like to say that I was just like, well, now that Anya is not really all that important to the plot, she's basically just a walking conveyor of cleavage. She just sort of, the way it's the dress and anyway, I'm just saying this, it's a very boobalicious end scene as they are leaving. The young man in me was very pleased with this movie.
She was wearing a suit when they were kidnapped, so he must have made her put on a dress at some point before tying her up.
As all Bond villains do, because they might get wet. Come on, Goodnight was in a bikini the last movie.
Yeah, because Scaramanga doesn't like no hiding places. So hidden weapons, and so they end up getting onto this weird submarine, which is shaped kind of like a spinning top, an upside down spinning top, so to speak. And they get in it, and it fires and floats onto the surface. And for some reason, this life raft even has to be luxurious. It has this really big bed, a couch and like bed on it with these curtains, full bar curtains, all of that. And Bond's like, oh, he likes Derringer 52. I guess he can't be all that bad. I'm like, really? And he seems to say it like he actually means it. But Anya picks up the gun between them and points it at him. And Bond's actually kind of shocked. And then she fires to knock the cap off the wine. And Bond's like, well, shouldn't as a condemned man be granted my last request? She's like, what is it? And he says, well, we need to get out of these wet things, their clothes or whatever. And then they start making out. And then it cuts to Jaws, who surfaces from the sea. And he just starts swimming in open ocean. And I guess he's going to be strong enough to make it back to the shoreline. Because supposedly we're near Sardinia, even though we don't see any shoreline around here. Good move, too, to have Jaws survive, because that's a good character you could use again, which they subsequently will. So then we see this British naval ship, or I assume it's the British naval ship. They pick up the life raft thing, and you have M and the defense secretary and Gogol are heading down the stairs, and they ask, well, do you think they're going to... The defense secretary asked if they might have a case of the bends, and M's like, well, we'll find out. Because they were coming down, I guess, from extremely deep waters at that point. Because it wasn't really clear. So when Atlantis sank, you only saw the part of it above the water sinking. You didn't get to see the model underwater crashing down into the underwater city. And so the submarine thing floats in. Bond and Anya are in bed, and she's asking, well, Bond, what if our superiors, what do they think of it? And he's like, oh, they're never going to find us. There's nobody out here. And sure enough, they get picked up. They're picked up by the ship, and they don't even realize it. And then she sees through the window as Bond, M and Hargreaves and the defense, they're all watching, and Gogol's watching.
There, yeah.
Gogol's there, and M's like 007. And
Triple X.
And the defense secretary's like, what the hell do you think you're doing? And Bond's like, just keeping the British end up, sir. And then he pulls the curtains, and You have
At
this
which point we get some sort of military marching band ensemble rendition of Nobody Does It Better, and it's terrible.
Yeah, some terrible cabaret type thing with it, and then you have the better Carly Simon version. As we go to the end credits, we see as the credits are rolling that the two helicopters, presumably one with Bond and one with Anya, take off and depart. And at the end of the credits, it falsely states that Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only.
Doesn't falsely state. Little movie in 1977 changed everything.
That's right. It was falsely stated it because I was just going to say a little movie in 1977 named Star Wars changed everything. And that's the end of The Spy Who Loved Me.
That is the end of The Spy Who Loved Me. A couple things. First things first, it was nice to see Commander Bond in the full naval uniform. I am disappointed we didn't get to see Daniel Craig in the full naval uniform. I thought that was a missed opportunity. But it is, yeah, it does. I think, no, Connery did it in You Only Live Twice. And also, you just reminded me, like, I didn't realize how much they took from You Only Live Twice. The Poisson symbol for Stromberg. That is the micro dot that Tanaka checks out in the Train Underground. Also, there was some striking things going on in Cairo in regards to Indiana Jones and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas ripping off Octopussy for a lot of Temple of Doom. That stuff in the train that's going on with the being coy back and forth and everything like that. It is a little bit more Tracy and Hepburned up in Temple of Doom, but it's definitely, you can see the DNA. There's a lot of stuff that's moving forward in the James Bond series. I'm finally comfortable with Roger Moore 100% because I'm accepting of the comedy now in the progression of it. There's a moment where the van, the maintenance truck driving through the desert and sort of Bond just flashes a grin and it goes with the music. And I'm like, oh, that's why I like Roger Moore. And I really like this movie. I am disappointed that you pointed out the fact that it makes no sense.
Yeah, a lot of this movie's plot points as I watched it doesn't make any sense. But what I liked, I think it does improve a lot of the You Only Live Twice storyline because Bond is actually an interesting character this time around. Yeah, we're taking submarines onto a super tanker instead of spaceships into a volcano, and the climax is improved upon dramatically. A few things I don't like about it, though. One, the nonsensical nature of the plot is a little weird because that kind of did throw me for a lot of it. Secondly, is the whole crux of this movie is it begins with Bond killing Anya's lover. And they establish that this is Anya's lover, and you see him kill him, and then right when you come back from the main titles, she is told that he is murdered. And you can tell that she is upset about this. And so when Bond and her meet, it's like a tension that's going throughout the movie, like when's she going to find out what's going to happen? And so when she finally does find out, yeah, she says that we can team up for the mission and then I'll kill you later. But it's like, well, is she going to do that? Are they going to be, is it going to be butting heads a bit more? And yet right before the climax really starts, she gets kidnapped and becomes the damsel in distress. And they don't have a payoff to this relationship that they've been building and this working relationship they've been building for the whole movie. It's like, yeah, you had a lot of repetitive encounters with Jaws, which were there to kill time so you can have character development between Bond and Anya. And you're establishing that they're very much a good pairing and they're equally skilled. And yet you don't demonstrate that in the crux of your movie, the entire third act of it. It's just not there. And they instead have the payoff be a joke where she fires the gun to blow off the lid of pop the cork of the champagne.
Okay, I don't think she shot. I think that was sort of one of the classic premature, whatever, loud noise. It was a subversion. You're supposed to think pop, and it's not the gun. She didn't. It was him doing the cork. I think. I don't think she shot. But yeah, I do feel that at the end when they are in the escape pod, there is just sort of like I'll flirt my way out of this. And it's like, no, there has to be a little bit more. But also it's funny though, because the crux, as you say, of the film with that relationship and being competitors and then colleagues and then lovers, and then it's all gone into a spiral because Bond killed, let's call him Victor. Yeah, I really like the relationship. Maybe it's part of the reason why I like Roger Moore in this is because he's playing off of Barbara Bach, the beautiful Barbara Bach, for the entire film. And so you do get a lot more personality from him, and it's not just Roger Moore walking through James Bond. And again, on the special features, it is the press junkets, and a lot of people ask him. Like, people are still feeling the Saint. And if you were to ask, let's say after Octopussy, I'd have to check out and see if there are any interviews where they continue either out of reverence or even just comparison. The same, just like Simon Templar and James Bond. And even when the special feature is like, this is how composed Roger Moore is at the time. And it's like, he rolls his eyes. It's like, it's not the same character. And then, it's beautiful. Anyway, I think that this is finally once this movie was released, I think people who didn't know about the Saint he's 100%. He's not Roger Moore anymore. He's not Simon Templar. He is James Bond by the time we get to The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yes, and that's the people kind of opinion on it. So, and I like that about it too. But yeah, that whole setup and crux of it just being completely wasted and not used at all in the third act seems like a very bizarre decision. Also, the fact that they don't really use Atlantis that much. It's like, okay, we're there in the beginning of the movie when we meet Stromberg. We're there in the middle when they go to visit him for that very brief meeting. And then there for a tiny bit at the end. But like the model showed, he has a whole city under here and all this kind of stuff. But we never get to see any of it. Which I thought, and because of the unique design of the Atlantis compared to the Liparus. I mean, yes, I get it. The Liparus is once again, just like the volcano lair, it's a very technically superb set in terms of craftsmanship and all that. But I would have been much more interested if they could have found a way in the story to incorporate the climax at Atlantis a lot more, or extended the length of the climax once he gets there and have him really have to fight his way through. And maybe on top of that, make Stromberg a more appealing villain, because he's just, like you said, he's like deadly serious all the time. He kind of sits there, he's eating his food. We don't really know much about him or why he's doing it. And I get it. It's because they thought up until almost the 11th hour that it was going to be Blofeld until they couldn't. Kevin McClory wouldn't budge on it, so they're like, okay, we'll just make this guy. Almost, I guess the idea is that he's like an eco-terrorist, because the environmentalism was a big thing at the time. So I guess, and so I wish the villain was a bit more memorable. I wish they made something of the whole setup with Bond and Anya, and it'd be nice if the plot made a little bit more sense at times. And yeah, the whole horror elements that they were building up Jaws for, and then having him, be Herman Munster. It's like, okay. And I admit, watching it now, even like the critique often is that, Jaws is just too goofy and laughable in Moonraker, whereas he's so much more intimidating in The Spy Who Loved Me. And I'm thinking, well, not really, because they have a lot of the build up for him in The Spy Who Loved Me, but once it gets down to the fighting and stuff, they do the little goofy humor a lot. So scary Jaws is Blue Suit Jaws. Yeah, that's the closest you get to it. But even then, there's like goofy things like, why didn't you just close your mouth? And for sure. But I'm just saying, like, what we do, like, I find before he becomes unkillable, after the first encounter at Cairo, and he's fine. After that, I'm just like, you are a cartoon character and no longer scary. And when he starts wandering around with those suspenders on, I'm checked out. I love Richard Kiel, but he is such a threatening villain that they had to make him a good guy by the end of the next movie. Yeah, and that's the thing in terms of the threatening aspect. It's like, yes, they did tease that. The villain doesn't land, the other stuff doesn't land, but I still find this is a really enjoyable Bond movie. Oh, for sure. It feels like Roger is more of James Bond in this. And the whole, the BS put on that M is doing, treating Bond nicely because he wants to impress Gogol and little stuff like that is great. So, anything else you have to say about this film, or would you give it your Martini rating? I am going to give it my Martini rating. You Only Live Twice, I gave 4, and Thunderball, I gave 7. And this has been an interesting mashup of both of those. So I think I'm gonna give this bad boy a 6. I think I'm gonna give it a 7. Ooh. I did enjoy it, and I actually enjoy the whole watch through. Because the thing with Thunderball is I still can't stand the first third of the movie, but I still gave that one a 7. So I'll give this one a 7 martinis as well. Okay.
Perfect. All right. And in future viewings, just so that you know, and you don't feel left out, because I have this written down in good old book form. If you need any of the variables and be like, what did I give that? I have it right here.
That's good.
Okay.
I've been all over the place and changing my mind week after week.
All right. Do you want to check out do you have anything else to say about?
It's a much better version of the Only Live Twice storyline. Same director though, and I feel some of those same problems are there. Like Blofeld, I thought was underwhelming in that movie, where Stromberg's a bit underwhelming here. But at least they had a good henchman in Jaws, whereas You Only Live Twice didn't have that. So much better improvement upon that storyline, and a much better improvement upon that climax. But very nonsensical storytelling, much like You Only Live Twice had a bunch of scenes like, wait, why'd you do that when you could just, that kind of thing. So, yeah, 7 martinis.
All right. Then let's check in with the chat and wrap this bad boy up.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Captain Cockney Mirror Spock, thank you for the cheers, sir. Always a pleasure to see you in the chat. Oh, also, you should check out Cult Classic Movie Corner. Cult Cinema. Fuck, damn it. Someday I'll get it right. Tomorrow with Thursday.
Right. You got it right. It was Cult Classic Movie Corner.
Oh, I did get it right. Cult Classic Movie Corner tomorrow at, oh my stars. This isn't going to help either of the hosts for tomorrow's show.
It's tomorrow at 3, or I should say it's dropping Thursday, November 18th at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific. And I say that because people are going to be watching this show on the recorded. So
that's true. I always forget. People sometimes watch after the fact. But yeah, you should check that out. Captain Cockney Mirror Spock and Tertiary Tiberius Mork will be doing Blade Runner. And I am very curious because I know the captain adores that film. Sherry is here. Sherry says hi. And she just watched Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me.
Fun movies.
Like, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about it because we're eventually going to get to Austin Powers, aren't we?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, why not? Why not? Big T Moore. Hello, Big T Moore. Well, hello, everybody. Cheers and an ahoy to you. And Big T Moore, definitely. Carly Simon, nobody does it better.
Yes.
When it ends up on the radio, the windows go down and the volume goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Cap says, this was my first Bond film, therefore it is objectively the best one. Oh, I don't want to start it. This is kind of interesting. Transmedia canonical verisimilitude strikes again. I'm assuming that this has something to do with the calling back to the original names of Miles and Major Boothroyd from the book, also with the henchmen. I think that was around the part of the conversation where we were.
Yeah.
LDG of Geeks and Joy. Hey, Scotty. Hey, Catherine. Good to see you, LDG.
See ya.
Also, Cap wants to know, why warn them if you are going to kill them 5 minutes later?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. Cam is here. Ahoy, Cam. Ahoy. Hello to you. And Cam greeting everyone in the chat. And I am as well thanking Cam, Sherry, the captain, LDG of Geeks and Joy, Big T Moore, and of course Sherry, who I may have said twice, but she is that nice. Until next week.
Super sticker.
Oh, and for the super sticker. Absolutely. I apologize. Kat, do you have anything else going on the internet this week that you want to pimp?
No. Other than nothing that we haven't already covered for this particular week.
All right. Sounds good. Until next week, James Bond will return, and we will see the remake to this movie, which is called Moonraker.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Kat. I'll see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. No, I can't say that. That's copyrighted. We'll just see you next week.
Yeah. See ya.